The Rainbow Unicorn government pledges to help migrants and refused refugees. Refused being the operative word in these circumstances, of course, but nonetheless. Politicians and campaigners have raised increasing concerns about the plight of hundreds of destitute migrants who are unable to work or access support, and some claim it's not safe to return to their home countries after asylum claims are refused. And we've only got their words for it that is the case, but at the end of the day, the terminology surrounding asylum applications, the terminology surrounding refugees, it's well and truly outdated, to say the least, because what we are seeing in recent times is exploitation. And whenever they try to turn on the sympathy to try and bolster their argument, they'll refer to decades gone by when there was real need for people to flee wherever it was they were fleeing from. But now we have people jumping on boats, traversing the European continent after making one illegal trip across the Mediterranean, and they choose their country of destination, and it tends to be a country that will offer them the biggest payout at the end of it all. You're not telling me that these people that are so desperate to flee the perils of where it is they fled from couldn't have stayed in France or any of the other plethora of European countries. Oh, no. They all sat and waited their turn to jump on a boat and traverse the English Channel, illegally of course, to be quote-unquote rescued so they could then trot to Scotland and try their hand at an asylum application, when the majority of them aren't asylum seekers nor refugees. You know, this started as the Syrian quote-unquote refugee crisis, quickly became the migrant crisis, but whenever it suits them, they'll refer back to them as refugees and asylum seekers, etc. And let's not forget the silencing of the grooming gang scandal in Glasgow, which in itself is fucking disgusting, but more importantly was the amount of different nationalities that these so-called asylum seekers held. The Syrian resettlement program that Thin Lips love to pat herself in the back over, encompassed people from Turkey, Egypt, Morocco, to name a few. Yeah, what fucking war is going on in Turkey? What part of Syria is Egypt? Nonetheless, in other cases, migrant women fleeing domestic violence. Oh, they traversed the European continent because they were fleeing violence. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. You're trying to turn on the waterworks for people that are supposedly here because they fled violence. Why can't their neighbouring countries take them in? You know, people from the same culture, etc. They refuse to take them in. So they come over here. And we get arseholes like the Rainbow Unicorn delegates, who seem to see no issue with the stance that they take. That's just... Anyway. And found themselves destitute and unable to access refugee accommodation or claim benefits for themselves and their children. The government confirmed it would act in last Thursday's budget, developing an anti-destitution strategy covering people with no recourse of public funds was highlighted as a priority in a new Connecting Communities budget strand. Yes, a plethora of namby-pamby pandering points were raised in the announcement of the budget, most of the money being pissed away in mitigating non-existent man-made climate change, but it's good to know that they put some aside to prioritise giving families a tenner a week to apparently raise them out of poverty, and putting some extra aside to accommodate for failed asylum seekers that shouldn't be here. Those without recourse to public funds cannot access homeless shelters or services. Concerns have been raised about destitute people's vulnerability to exploitation, so-called survival sex, and trafficking. Well, if they've had their claims rejected, instead of waiting about in the country for a wonder to occur, maybe they could think about going back to where they came from. Then they wouldn't have to resort to these forms of action, no? Alison Thulis, a Rainbow Unicorn feminist for Glasgow Central, said the commitment by the Rainbow Unicorn government to develop an anti-destitution strategy is a significant step. It underlines Rainbow Unicorn Land's commitment to building cohesive communities and recognising and valuing diversity. I don't really think these people have got the memo just about yet. Where is the proof that increasing the levels of diversity and continuing to do so, with no limit, no cap, creates cohesive societies? This obsession, this fucking obsession with valuing diversity and speaking in Scotland's name, of course. On the one hand, we're a historically racist country. You know, white man bad, the usual routine from this wankers and their ilk. But then in the next breath, Scotland, the same country that's historically racist and full of white men, apparently is committed to building cohesive communities and pandering because of diversity. We love the diversity, apparently. The reality of the matter is, it's the SNP that are committed to building so-called cohesive communities. It's the SNP that are obsessed with diversity. So the fact that they're focusing so much on migrants, every possible opportunity that they can fester up to get these people here, they're going for it, of course. But just know that there's an element of promoting diversity or valuing diversity linked to that. So when they target the African diaspora, when they target Asian Muslims and so on, that's for the values of diversity. I regularly see constituents at my surgeries who, despite living and working in the UK, raising families and contributing greatly to their communities, always have to add in the contributing greatly to the communities element, you know? Most of whom are doing jobs that any normal Scottish person could do. They don't act as if they're all coming over here and contributing greatly to our communities. Why can't they contribute greatly to their own communities? They're not all doctors and engineers. That is a lie that grew old years ago. In some cases, I have had to fight tooth and nail for financial support to be paid to children born in the UK, simply because their parent or parents have come here from another country. She claims, in other cases, migrants with permission to work were working 7 days a week trying to make ends meet, but were refused the financial assistance they were entitled to. This, she claimed, was pure malevolence and shows the true colours of the Home Office's hostile environment. There's that term being phrased again. Such a hostile environment that they've allowed for record levels of non-EU migration to foot-loan through for the last, 3-4 years at the very least. Something that's been kept rather under lock and key from when it's all said and done. All this talk about ending freedom of movement, all this talk about a hostile environment, propped up by all of them. They all love to throw that accusation about the place. Meanwhile, in the background, record levels of non-EU immigration have been entering year on year. But again, there's a conflation. Again, they can't help themselves. It's ridiculous. Why are we talking about migrants with permission to work, working 7 days a week, etc., etc., when the beginning of this article talked about people that were claiming asylum? So again, we talk about the plight of asylum seekers to justify making it easier for migrants. I wonder why that is. She said that the Scottish Government was forced to mitigate the damage done by this heartless Tory UK government. Oh yes, of course, so much mitigation has taken place, you know. Impoverishment continues, they just blame Westminster. Meanwhile, they're pumping money out to Malawi and Zambia, Pakistan, etc. They're pumping God knows how much into mitigating non-existent man-made climate change, pumping God knows how much in organisations and institutions surrounding feminism, the LGBT emphasis on the T, migrant and refugee organisations. They've got plenty to piss away on social justice, but they don't have any when it comes to mitigating the problems that their own people face. But it's easier to blame Westminster, isn't it? You shower of shit. Anika Joy, project director of the Glasgow Night Shelter, said its staff and guests have been involved in the consultation for the development of Scotland's anti-destitution strategy. That's great to know. We are delighted to see its mention in the budget. We desperately hope that the people the team met who shared their trauma and experiences of sleeping rough, exploitation and survival decisions, expecting that action will follow, will be honoured. Expecting actions that will follow. Because these people, no matter where it is they come from and for whatever reason they've gave to justify why they've come over here, they all seem to have one thing in common. And that is that not only do they know that there's a good chance they'll be let into the country, but they actually expect their demands to be honoured. But so much assumptions seem to follow these people wherever they go. So much assumptions propped up by these people, in fact. Take this woman's Twitter, this Anika Joy. It says here, broken boilers mean coal flats in the middle of winter. Worrying increase in housing problems in Glasgow. So she retweets this and she says, also think that as well as practical health matters like feeling cold, this contributes to feeling you're not cared for, that no one's looking out for you, and that really bothers me. For any human, but especially someone who's survived trauma and is affected by a hostile environment, how do you know that they've survived trauma? The assumption is that because they're claiming asylum, trying their arm at asylum, they must have automatically, by default, because they wouldn't lie, they Must have survived trauma. I'm sure the Turkish that are raping Glaswegian girls experience so much trauma. I'm sure the Africans that are pretending to be Syrian experienced a hell of a lot of trauma. Sure they did. But as long as there's people like this to justify these people coming over here with these false claims, it will continue. MPs launched new legal bid to allow asylum seekers to work after 6 months. So on top of opening the door to as many routes as possible for people to come here from international backgrounds, they're now wanting to give asylum seekers the right to vote as well as work. Somebody explain to me what the difference between a so-called asylum seeker and an economic migrant would be if you give them not only the ability to vote but the ability to work too. So they could come over here, chance their arm, becoming an economic migrant. If that fails, just apply for asylum, or vice versa. You're giving them all these different opportunities to fall back on when one fails. Not to mention, is that we're giving them the ability to work after 6 months if no action has been taken as of yet, which justifies the inaction up until this point. Meaning, of course, that from a Scottish government perspective anyway, they wish for these people to stay here. They want them all here. The more the merrier. So instead of getting people that have had their asylum claims rejected to leave the country, deport them essentially, they just need to sit back and wait for the 6 months to pass for them to be able to then find a job. And then what? When they've got a job to meet ends meet, or worse to that effect, is that indefinite? Is there a time limit? Of course not. Currently, as things stand, they have to wait about a year before they can apply for temporary work and whatnot. And that in itself rewards the Scottish Government for doing fuck all. Asylum seekers who have waited more than 6 months for a decision on their claim could be given the right to work under a new bill brought forward in Parliament. Now, of course, the reason it, in some instances, it can be more than 6 months and so on, is because they've had their initial claim rejected, but these people go on to apply again and again and again until they get what they want. And then they know fine well that the SNP will trot on out with their heartfelt plea, namby-pamby pandering. It's only a matter of time before these people are all rewarded for their patience. Not to mention, I thought there was at the very least 30,000 children in Scotland supposedly in poverty. I thought there was food bank usages across the country. So why are you encouraging more people over here? Anyway, SNP's Carl Monaghan accused the government of wasting the talents of thousands of people. And how do you know these people are talented? How the fuck would you know that? You just assume, as per usual. And even if they are talented, so what? You know, all I have heard since I started this channel is migration this, migration that. You just cannot get away from it. These people are obsessed with immigration. And then they've got the hard neck to scratch their head as to why there's pushback. Maybe it's because you started this shit off as a Syrian refugee crisis, and now you started telling us that not only is it a migrant crisis, but they're also talented and hardworking and they contribute dearly. But above all else, they're going to help rejuvenate our declining population. We're not having enough babies, so let's encourage migrants over here from different cultures and different races or ethnicities, depending on who you ask. Nobody seems to use a bit of critical thought and look deep into the future to see what that will lead to, demography-wise. Why the fuck would you need to incentivise native births when there's a plethora of African diaspora out there to incentivise here? People seeking refuge are currently prevented from working while their claim is being processed. Now bear in mind this all started from the Syrian refugee crisis. Now it's just people every second day of the week cropping up in Western nations, applying for asylum, and knowing full well that if there's a namby-pamby lefty party in that country, or a bunch of activists, they're in with a good shout. Asylum seekers can only apply for the right to work after they've been waiting for a decision on their claim. Even then, they can only fill roles in shortage occupation lists such as geophysicists and Mandarin teachers. Oh, a heartfelt please. If the bill's passed into law, asylum seekers will be able to work 6 months after lodging their claim. And if it gets rejected, they don't need to go home. Oh no, that's a given. But now they can work too. And vote potentially. Right now, the UK government is wasting the talents of thousands of people who could be and want to be contributing to their communities. Their communities, they're asylum seekers, but they've got communities here. Funny that's. Second of all, if they're claiming asylum, you can't rewrite the laws of asylum to suit yourselves. If anything, they do need to be rewritten, but to make them a bit more stringent, not easier. You can't rewrite them to suit your own needs. You can't rewrite them to make it even easier than it currently is, because currently as things stand, it's been exploited. These people know fine well that applying for asylum does not automatically give them the ability to not only vote, but to fucking work. But you want to do so because what? Progression, inclusion. It's high time the Tories took a leaf out of Rainbow Unicorn Land's book when it comes to being an open and welcoming country. Go fuck yourself. The SNP are steamrolling this country towards a socialist shithole, tarnishing our name in a fucking process. An open and welcoming country. Go and fuck yourself. Really. People seeking asylum are fleeing dangers we can't even begin to imagine. There you go again with the assumptions. You give these people the excuses they require. They're fleeing dangers we can't even begin to imagine. What? Searching for a better life. The amount of times these African people have been upfront about why they're here. They want a better life. What dangers? Their countries might be shitholes, and if I was in their position, I'd try my arm up the same flit. But the point is, you need to put your foot down. But instead of that, you roll out the red carpet, you incentivize them, you encourage them, and in many cases, you find yourself in this predicament. Because when they listen to your cancerous, pathetic, cringy talking points, that encourages them over here, which you want. But then they find themselves in the predicament of not having their demands respected, not being able to live here as an asylum seeker, and instead having to reapply and reapply and reapply. Then they find themselves in the quandary of having a hard time with it. And whose fault's that? Of course it's the Tories, according to the Rainbow Unicorn Party. Really, whose fault is that? A private members bill, which has been tabled on Wednesday, is under siege of a cross-party support. Of course it does. However, it's unlikely to make it on the statute book without government backing. Stephen Hale, Chief Executive of Refugee Action, which is campaigning to lift the ban on allowing refugees to work, urged ministers to intervene. People seeking asylum are left to languish in limbo and in poverty because of this morally and economically short-sighted rule that stops them working. No, I'll tell you what the problem is here. It is encouraging everybody from all walks of life to come over here with more than half the time completely unviable asylum applications. People from Turkey, Egypt, Morocco, etc. coming over here to chance their arm at an asylum application will find themselves having it rejected. And it's not a morally bankrupt Westminster government, nor is it a hostile environment that is to blame. It's your pathetic pandering. There is a strong public and cross-party business and cross-party support to give people seeking asylum the right to work. It's high time the government acted and lifted the ban. Comes as Boris Johnson prepares for a post-Brexit immigration shake-up. Yeah, it's making it easier for the Africans. It's great. Fucking love post-Brexit Britain. Jesus, man. And get this, to finish off. I knew there was something more to it when they were patting themselves in the back with this shit. But at the time, there was no mention of it. So they let the dust settle effectively before unveiling what this was really about. Scottish Government extends young carer grants. You know, gave off the impression it was young Scottish carer trainees and so on. Oh no, a bit more to it than that. What a shock. Young carers going through the immigration process will be able to apply for the Scottish Government's Young Carer Grant without fear of risking their immigration status. The change follows lengthy discussions between the UK and Scottish Government to amend the Home Office regulations. On top of that, they're also encouraging young asylum seekers to have children. Anybody under the age of 18, to be precise. Since last year, asylum seekers are aged under 18 can apply for the Best Start grant pregnancy and baby payment after the government reached agreement with the UK that it would not jeopardise their immigration status. So they're incentivising young asylum seekers and refugees and so on to have children. What a great contribution they're fucking making, eh? Young carers make an invaluable contribution to Scotland. However, many don't get the same opportunities. This is why the Rainbow Unicorn government are using our social security powers to help improve the quality of life for young carers through this grant, first of its type. We've also been pressing the government to agree to young carers who are subject to immigration control receiving the grant. I'm delighted that the UK government has agreed to our request, and from spring this year, many carers will be able to access Young Carer Grant without the fear of risking their immigration status. This important grant supports young people in what could be a pivotal stage in their lives, when they may be finishing school, looking for employment, or starting further education. By extending the eligibility to those who may be subject to immigration controls, we will ensure that they are also treated with the dignity, fairness, and respect they deserve. So, of course, on the surface level, it looks as if this is just making it easier for Scottish young carer trainees. But of course, there is something looming in the background. It's about incentivising people from overseas, and it's about putting things in place for when they're here. What a shock.